So if we may, I'll make a start. Liz is just starting the recording. And before we go any further, can I ask everybody in the room just to introduce themselves so that the people who are online will know who's actually here. Start with you, David, for a change.
Dave House.
Sandra Joy, Councillor for Uplands Ward.
Paxton Hood-Williams, Councillor for Fairwood.
Liz Jordan, Scrutiny Officer.
Julie Davies, Head of Child and Family Services.
Louise Beckett, Learning and Innovation Team Manager.
Okay, thank you, Louise. So you can see that we are a bit low on numbers today. So I'll ask Liz, first of all, to say what apologies she's had.
And we've received apologies from Councillors Mike Day, Kevin Griffiths, Yvonne Jardine, Victoria Holland and Susan Jones, Chair.
So my thanks to everybody who is here, and a very warm welcome as well. But I didn't say that to start off with, which I should have, so I apologise. Both officers, members and cabinet member. But we are sitting on the ground, obviously, so I'll be expecting those who are here, and the members who are here, to be asking a lot of questions for those who are not here as well. And I hope you're listening to that out there. Item 2 is disclosure of interest. Anybody got any interest that they want to disclose at this stage? Okay, nobody's indicating that they are, so we'll move on to item 3, which is a prohibition of the whip votes and declaration of party whips. Item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had a chance to have a look through those minutes. I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make in terms of the accuracy. I'm not seeing any indication or sign of that, so I assume that you're approving that. And there wasn't anything I particularly picked up from the letters, unless anybody wants to, or from the minutes or the letters, in fact, unless anybody wants to pick them up. No, okay. Item 6 is public question time, and I suspect we haven't got any. I'll make a change, which moves us straight into the agenda then, which is performance monitoring. And I'm not sure who's going to lead on this first of all.
So I think that's going to be me, Paxton.
Alan?
I think that's,
Okay,
yeah.
Alison, then we'll ask you to start if we may.
Yeah, thank you. What have we got? Is the report shared?
No,
Sorry, not back in. Okay, so in the report is for the month of February. In February, our single point of contact experienced a decrease in contacts. When we analysed the trends, there were 46 less contacts that month, but when we analysed the trends, we do typically see contacts to decrease during February. And equally, our IAA information advice and assistance service saw 97 less contacts that month, which again is typical for the time of year. Our early help hubs actually experienced a significant increase in contacts, and it was the highest contact figure that we'd actually seen since April 2021. So for some time it's been much more stable. However, we saw a significant increase, and there were 27 people put on the waiting list, and 59 people being supported through duty. So during February, we also saw an increase in referrals for comprehensive assessment within our supported care planning teams. And we saw an increase in referrals by 5, but we were actually supporting 1,145 cases, which is 20 lower than previous. The Learning and Innovation team and our business support team are working together to help child and family teams with assessment and recording challenges. This has resulted in an increase of children being seen during an assessment by 2%, so the recording and reporting is more accurate. The number of looked after children had continued to reduce that month during February, and it had reduced by 3 to 485. In February, we saw 17 children and young people added to the Child Protection Register, which has increased from 168 to 175 plus 7, with 10 children being removed. It's worth saying that we, within my team, have started to look at some analysis of trends within our child protection area in response to the decrease that we'd previously seen. So we are looking at understanding child protection right through from the ISD phase through to initial strategy discussion phase, right the way through to reviews of child protection, and we'll be able to provide more information on that in future reports. The number of looked after children continued to reduce down to 485, which was a reduction of 3 due in February. And we saw 70, oh no, I've done that one, haven't I? Sorry. Youth Justice Service has seen an increase of out-of-court disposals in the last few months, and that's been consistently an increasing upward trend. We actually believe that to be as a oh, let me find the right wording for you. In this report. Attributed to a reduction in the number of children being deferred from court in line with the Child First principles in youth justice. So we are seeing that increase in out-of-court disposals. Our fostering service have 2 applicants who will be attending panel attended during March and April. In addition to this, there were 10 potential applicants that were invited to attend preparation training in April. Our family support service saw an increase in referrals with 16 new referrals, which did cause waiting lists in some areas. However, teams stepped in to support each other across family support services to ensure that we reduce the impact of waiting times for children, young people and families. And finally, our Western Bay Adoption Service are seeing that inquiries for adoption are increasing, and they forecast that more adopters will be approved this year compared to last year. And that's all of the highlights. Thank you.
I was just going to add in a couple of points, if that's okay, Chair, just to offer some assurances. In terms of our early help hub model, I know he's mentioned a waiting list. We've introduced the duty line, and what that means is that families aren't waiting to receive a service, but they are receiving advice and support. And what that does mean is that when we have a worker that can be allocated to them, they're generally are still wanting to be engaged with us, whereas if you have a gap and you have no contact with them, then at the point that we can allocate them a lead or a key worker, then families sometimes feel, or they feel they've got sufficient advice and information that they actually are okay and don't need that lead worker. So that model's working really well in keeping families engaged in early help and helping them to access community resources perhaps that they may not otherwise have done. That's a positive move that was introduced by the service to try and mitigate waitings. We do still have some recruitment challenges in that area in terms of vacancies and sickness. So that's working really well. So we're going to see how we can sustain that going forward. Louise mentioned the child protection registration numbers have been going down, and we have an initial look across Wales is that's the trend across Wales in terms of reductions of children on the child protection register. So we're not an outlier. But we are, for our own assurance purposes, going to just analyse that data further so we can be assured at the point that the referral comes in and we have that initial strategy discussion that we're confident that our thresholds are sound and consistent and we're making the right decisions at the right time for children and families, and only putting through that statutory process when it's necessary and there's evidence of significant harm. And the thing I wanted to just bring to your attention and hopefully provide you some assurances is in the report you'll see that of our looked after children population, 6 of them are currently in an unregistered provision because we weren't able to find a registered provision, and they're in the report as the acronym is OWR. And what that means is that we're staffing them normally in an Airbnb with agency staff, with some of our own staff, while we continue to search for regulated provision. We've got a very formalised process wrapped around this that ensures that we report everything into CIW, Co-Inspectorate Wales, and they monitor us regularly, and they've raised no concerns or worries with us about these arrangements. And in fact, of the 6 that you see in this report, 4 of those children have returned home to their families, so we're able to reunify them home. So that's positive. They didn't need to remain looked after, but that's an ongoing challenge for the service to continue to find regulated provision at the right time that's suitable and match the child's needs. Thanks, Joe.
Just a question on the early help hubs. I can see the data for some reason seems to have spiked a bit. What sort of things have you had the opportunity to analyse? Are there any trend? You know, is there anything there that is at the back of that? And you know, are you able to deal with them?
I think we tend, for this particular data, we tend to see it during holiday periods. So if you think of February, you often have the half term. So in relation to that, however, my team are exploring across the service a number of areas where we are seeing spikes to understand the demand behind them, because that obviously helps us not just with the reporting, but also in terms of service planning. So we are looking further into that, but we think for February, the spike is attributed to the school holidays.
Okay.
I could just come in, and I think it would be helpful for us to have a further analysis of the types of reasons that are being referred in. I suspect that some of it is attributed to the impact of poverty. Some of it will be attributed to children not being in school full time, perhaps. And some of it, I certainly know that emotional health and wellbeing workers in schools are very busy at the moment in relation to lower level emotional wellbeing needs of children. But I think it would be helpful for us, and we're looking at this as part of our target operating model, to understand themes and trends and types of needs and support, so we can best understand what community assets may be available to support families that go beyond the early help hub model, and also link it in with schools as well. So yeah. So,
As well as that upward trend in early help, there's also been that upward trend in the single point of contact. There are a number of people who are reporting in, aren't there? And presumably you're still investigating that at this point in time.
We know the main reasons for that are the impact of the early release scheme. So a greater level of inquiries are coming from probation, which are much more complex than they were previously. So we have a higher number of contacts from
where did you say?
From probation
Okay.
service, to help them do their risk assessments as part of the early release scheme. And also CAFCAS, we had a higher volume of requests for information from CAFCAS. But by far our biggest source of contact remains the police, and a lot of those don't necessarily need our attention because they automatically send them in. So those are the highest sources of contact. So we've got All Wales Heads of Children's Services a meeting with South Wales Police this week to help understand how we can improve information sharing, so that we only receive the information that we need to be able to process, rather than sending everything through to Children's Services.
So are you saying basically you're not too concerned with these trends because you think you know the reason and the reasons are valid?
I wouldn't say I'm not concerned. I'm concerned that the demand is high. We may not have sufficient capacity at every point to be able to manage the demand in a timely way because of the volume that comes in from. So we have had this conversation with probation about how they could support us and in relation to accessing the information that they need. And it's a regional conversation. So we've also partnered with MPT colleagues who have similar issues. So we're trying to come up with a common arrangement, certainly from within our region.
I'm still looking desperately for hands here, not finding any. David.
Yeah, no, I don't want to usurp the panel's responsibility. One of the things that Cabinet and Council have signed off around budget planning is basing that budget planning in the MTFP on the delivery of target operating models, which is different language. It's always it's the sort of thinking we've had particularly in children's services around. We've had for a long time safe lap reduction strategy, for example, which was a strat line for a whole set of interconnected activity and service design, where you kind of, you know, overarching measure might be, well, if you've got everything you know, as good as it could be, then you would assume that would reduce the number of children that end up needing to be looked after, because you're more successfully supporting more children to live safely at home. Now, we've tried to develop that over many years, and we've had our most sophisticated attempt at it now, where we've tried to really closely align that strategy, not just in children's services, but across the whole of social services, to, well, if in 4 years' time, you know, we'd organised ourselves the best we could. There's lots of variables in that, and lots of external winds that play into that as well. You know, Julie's mentioned one, you know, poverty and the impact of poverty, and you know, all of those wider things have an impact. But nevertheless, you know, do a bit of crystal ball gazing, do some planning assumptions around what we think is deliverable, try and match the level of financial investment that's available to the council, at least as a set of planning assumptions over the next few years. And then the reason that I'm linking it to this conversation is then to also play that through into, well, what might some of your performance look like? So if all of that service design works in that way, if we manage to invest in the right places, if we manage to shift some of the investment that perhaps isn't delivering good outcomes for children and families to different places and deliver better outcomes, what might some of the numbers look like in this report? So that was a really long context set into, Julie, where do you think we're at in terms of the numbers looking like we might want them to look like if we delivered that target operating model successfully over the next few years? How close are we? Where might there be big changes for the committee to get their head around as well? Because that'll be shaping some of your conversations over the next couple of years. That was a nice question to keep you occupied, Julie.
Thanks, Dave. I'll come back from your holiday. So the shape of child and family services going forward, so we're looking forward maybe the next 3 to 5 years, is about how we can have less children needing statutory intervention. So that the swing would be, percentage terms, we're looking at roughly 60% would be in our early intervention and prevention side of the service, which would be early help hubs, how the emotional health and wellbeing work we do in schools, the youth service, children needed care and support, and then maybe 40% in our statutory side, so children on the register, children looked after, children on special guardianship orders. And I think we're probably, in terms of where we probably are at now, when you look at, if you added up the numbers, I'm looking at Lou now, but we're probably about 50-50 at the moment, maybe, with the numbers, but we've still got to refine the data so we know it's accurate, so we're counting all of the right things. And then in terms of our looked after children population, we're hoping to reduce that to around about the 450 mark. And at the moment we're at 483.
That's 485.
Yeah, I think we're at 476 a bit. So we are definitely on a downward trajectory, but of that population, we want more of them to be in our in-house provision. So most of them to be in our fostering service, whether it's a mainstream carer or a kinship carer. So I haven't got it in front of me now, but a good 60% of those. And then where they need residential care, that at least 50% of those are in our in-house provision, and the rest are externally commissioned. So what I was planning to do was, when we, and Louise does know this, so it's not a shock, but we are going to reconfigure the report so it starts to capture that information. So we have less externally commissioned care when it's needed, and we're growing our in-house care so that when children need that care, it's our care and it's in Swansea. That's the big plan. So the data will start to present itself, so you can see that shift along the continuum of need. And it may be that children need statutory intervention, but for a shorter period of time, so on the register for shorter periods of time, or looked after but voluntarily for a shorter period of time while we support families in terms of helping them to be able to care for their child safely at home.
So basically, if I understand it right, what you're saying is that you're slightly changing the philosophy in terms of the way you operate.
I think we're looking to divert resources. So it's very much in line with all the legislation that we're bound by, the Children Act, for example. But added on to that, then we have the Welsh Government policy commitments, and that's very much about children remaining living at home where it's safe to. That also is in line with the legislation. But it's having the wherewithal. Now we're becoming more fully staffed in our statutory teams. it means that we're more able to support families directly and do the work with them to help them. So therefore, the shift in terms of the numbers that we may need to see on the register should we probably stabilise at the number we're at now, and that would be a healthy number for our population and indices of deprivation. And I looked after population. That's probably should be lower than it is, but to be able to maintain those levels, we need to have more resource in prevention and early intervention, and that's not just in the early help hubs. It's how we support people when they contact us at the front door, the proportionate assessments that we do, the family network meetings that we have, the outcomes of initial strategy. Only have an initial strategy discussion when there's evidence of potential significant harm or harm occurring. So it's bringing partners on that journey, because sometimes we're managing the anxiety of other professionals in taking things forward to the statutory process.
So change of philosophy perhaps was the wrong word, but change in operating practice is perhaps closer to it. Is that right? Would it be worth us having a session specifically on that?
Absolutely.
Build into next year's programme?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Yeah.
Because then I think we could better understand exactly what you're talking about. Right? So perhaps we build that into the programme for next year. Okay. Any other questions around? Not going to get off quite that easily. Pardon? I noticed there's quite a shift, or seem to be, in terms of away from, in terms of fostering Wales towards the Independent Fostering Association at the moment, in terms of the balance between the two. Obviously, there's pressure on you to get rid of independent fostering anyway. So where do you go with this now in that sense if we're going to reverse our trend?
We can use independent fostering agencies if they're not for profit. So organisations such as Barnardo's and St David's, for example, but that they are generally more higher unit costs than perhaps the in-house provision is. So the way that we're working at the moment is that we know we need to have more of our in-house foster carers. So there's a big drive on at the moment to recruit more foster carers. It's a challenge across Wales in terms of interest in fostering. It's similar to adoption, understanding why we have less people coming forward. We do have some carers that want to transfer to us from independent fostering agencies. I was talking in the office earlier about 2 foster carers. So it's two, and we are having some success with, for example, council employees wishing to become foster carers, and other larger organisations encouraging that, and helping people understand what that means. So we've got a massive campaign underway, which is resourced but dependent on Welsh Government grant to continue that activity, which will help us to recruit more of the right foster carers that we need for our Swansea children. So that we've got a 3-year plan as part of our target operating model to get to that point in terms of having the right capacity, skills and expertise, and the right numbers and types of posts in place to achieve that. But you're right, the shift, we have got more children with independent fostering ages, and sometimes it's because we haven't got enough of the right in-house foster carers for our children at the moment.
Basically, it's a change, because as I remember it, we were doing pretty well with Swansea, Foster Swansea, as against independent fostering. Has the move from Foster Swansea to Foster Wales meant that we haven't been so successful in recruiting?
I wouldn't say so, no. I think that across Wales, every local authority is facing a challenge to recruit foster carers. And I think some of that you can root back into COVID and people's choices about the impact of COVID on cost of living, on their lifestyles, and some people thinking differently and wanting to do different things with their lives. So I think it's, I wouldn't say, no, it's not that. I think the collective is still helping us to reach out. We just need to think creatively about how we reach out and who we're trying to reach to, and still busting some of the myths about becoming a foster carer and you can be single and you can be in work, for example, is something that I think is still not well enough understood. That's just one example.
Mark, you've got a question?
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Chair. what are the current platforms you're using to generate greater involvement in terms of foster carers? And I'm sure there are a lot of ward councillors who would love to get on board with this and help the programme. Thank you.
We're using a lot of social media platforms such as Facebook, and I don't know whether we use Instagram, but we have local radio adverts, and we very much welcome local ward councillors promoting it. We have information we can share with you out in your communities. Do a lot of community events. We go into communities, local community centres, local libraries, big events like the air show, the Pride event. So we try and make ourselves visible within communities, and certainly would welcome any advice from ward members about any localities we could go to where there's a good venue that we could use, and the team will turn up and just invite people along or walk around in communities.
Yeah, sounds fine. I'd be very interested in attending these events, and I'm sure other councillors would too. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I noticed the adoption waiting figures are up slightly as well at the moment. Are we struggling there?
We are struggling to find adopters in the right area, because for some children it's not safe for them to be placed in the area that they were born in. So we normally are able to recruit quite a high number of adopters from Bridgend, for example. So we're exploring why that interest is not there at the moment. And again, the team are being creative in ways to try and reach people. It's mainly about going into communities, to be fair, and going to community events in those areas to help us reach people. But yes, we do need to. But again, it's not unique to Swansea or our region. It's a challenge across all of Wales in relation to interest in becoming adopters.
Seems to be a bit up and down, because fairly recently the figures have been looking reasonably good in that respect, but now they're slipping a bit.
I think it's because there's more children waiting to be adopted that are from Swansea,
Okay.
perhaps, and there's smaller numbers of children coming forward for adoption from the other two local authorities in our region. And in essence, we need to find more adopters from outside of Swansea for some of our children.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, what I was going to say, and I don't know if anybody else has got questions. I've certainly come to the end of the questions that I've got on this subject at the moment. So in that case, if nobody's got anything else, I'll move on, if I may, to item 8, which is a delivery of corporate priorities policy, the commitments in relation to CFS. Who's going to lead on this?
I think
Louise?
I'll go through. Yeah, I'll go through
Okay.
this one if that's okay, Chair. Thank you. And I'm sure Julie and Co can jump in if I miss anything. Yeah, just thank you to the panel for again giving us the opportunity to bring this report, which gives us a chance to pull together you know, an overview of the work across child and family services towards our corporate priorities and our policy commitments. Some of this I think covers what we've just talked about, really, in terms of the target operating model and the strategies that we're employing. As I'm sure you know, it continues to be a challenging time in terms of demand and the complexity of demand. But as we've reported here monthly, so for example in Louise's report just now, believe that we're still making really good progress, and that's down to the hard work and the commitment of our staff. So again, it's a nice opportunity for me to put that on record of my thanks to our teams. I won't go into too much detail, as hopefully you've all read the report, and a lot of the content is things that we've brought to panel over the months. But just to pick out some key points, the first section is about our prevention and early help model. Much of this comes under my colleague Councillor Gwillim's portfolio, but it's a really important part of how we work with families to prevent further escalation of need for services. And the hub model is working really well, and you can see that the majority of our cases are being closed with their goals achieved, which is really positive. There's a bit of information there about our CMET teams, which are continuing to work really innovatively and in a very holistic way with children and young people in our communities. Does note the uncertainty of the funding situation there, but you know, we're working to make sure that this work continues past July when that funding ends. Section 2.4 references our neurodiverse specialist lead worker and the behavioural support specialist, a really growing area of demand, but this is so important in enabling us to work really proactively with our families, even though, as we know, the waiting list for clinical diagnosis are very long. We're making sure that we're still getting the support in at the early stages. The report goes on to describe the work of our teams working further along the continuum of needs. So that's the edge of care and our care experience children and young people. For example, our PAC team working alongside parents and newborn babies, again, getting that help in at the very earliest opportunities, supporting families to stay together and hopefully reducing the need to take children into care. As we've just had a discussion on, we're continuing to try and expand our numbers of in-house foster carers with Foster Wales Swansea, a really important strand of our strategy to respond to elimination of profit and reducing the need for residential places. As we discussed, I think it was it last month, we talked about the youth homeless service prevention service has now moved into Bays. We heard last time about the prevention work that's going on in schools, the new supported accommodation framework, and those are some of the priorities that have been looked at over the past year. Hopefully members were able to see the work of our SGO young people before council last week, when two of our young people were there to show some of the artwork that they've been doing with the support group there in the Glenvivian. The Special Guardianship Service has really grown this year and has achieved some recognition for its. I think it's one of a kind. Julie might correct me if I'm wrong. You know, there aren't any other local authorities doing this kind of work, and it's been recognised as a really important and best practice, really. So that's fantastic. Our workforce, in regards to workforce, the academy team is continuing to go from strength to strength, and again has been highlighted as good practice. I was asked to present to the Cross Wales network of cabinet members of social services about this, and I know in that same week the principal officer Kelly also was asked to present on this to the British Association of Social Workers. So it's a really good way of getting our newly qualified social workers supported and nurtured and helped in their career, part of our Grow Your Own strategy. Section 3 of the report is relating to that better care pledge. As we've talked about, we need growing the work we're doing to grow our in-house foster carers. I think, as we've previously reported, we've converted some of that space in the Recilia Activity Centre to now provide some excellent emergency provision, and connected to that, our ongoing recruitment of staff in residential services to make sure that we have that consistency and that really high level of expertise. And they're all PACE trained, trauma-informed trained, and working closely with our therapeutic services to help and do some really important work with some very often quite vulnerable young children and young people in difficult circumstances. So I really take my hat off to them. So yeah, definitely onwards and upwards. We're committed to switch that target operating model that Dave mentioned earlier, and yeah, it'd be great to bring a bit more detail on that back to a future panel. And so yeah, thank you for the opportunity to bring the report.
Thank you, Louise. I will now throw it open again for members of the panel to raise questions. I've seen a lot of shaking heads, so that was quiet, and I must admit I didn't particularly have anything I wanted to ask in respect to this, but it will be interesting to see when it comes back in terms of new methodology that you're going to bring into play. It'll be interesting for us to have a look at that and have an opportunity to comment on it. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Short and sweet there.
Easy, very easy. We can make it more difficult if you want us to.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Item 9 basically is the review of the year for 24-25 as we come to the end of this municipal year. Really as much for members to make any comments that they want to in terms of how they think we ought to be moving along as a scrutiny performance panel. I'm quite happy for officers to stay if they want to, and if they've got anything they'd like to contribute, then we'll obviously be pleased to hear it. So again, it's quiet. But having said that, we have got a model that we're starting to put together. Liz and myself, so that'll be ready fairly soon. So that'll tell us where we're going, or where we think we should be going. We will circulate that obviously to people, and it'll come out to office as well for them to have a look at it and see where they are. As I say, nothing has been raised particularly in terms of the review of the year. We mentioned a couple of things there that we might look to bring in next year. So what we will do, once we finalise it, Liz and myself, what we think up to a point, we'll then send it out to you for consultation. So if you could let us have our views, we'd be very grateful for that, and then we'll build that in and amend the programme accordingly. As I say, what we will send is basically what we think is sensible at this point in time, but obviously it can be changed without any problem at that time, because there's nothing set in stone. So all I can say in that sense now, in terms of the review, obviously there's not a lot to be said. Having said that, in essence, was there anything particularly that you thought went well? Anything that you would want to improve? Or are we focused on the right things from your point of view? And have you learned anything that would help us for next year? Indeed, very quiet. So we will produce our programme. It'll be circulated to officers, obviously, for your comments in terms of where we think we're going, anything you want us to have a look at as well. And members, you'll have a copy as well. And if you could feed back to us, we'd be very grateful. Basically, I think that's the end of the agenda for today. Oh, sorry, David.
I could just make a general comment. I appreciate that it's quiet when you're asking that question around how are things going, and in terms of the committee's business, and then planning that forward plan. I think I take that as just a reminder of the maturity of this panel now. You know, we've had this as a long-standing, dedicated, you know, very detailed scrutiny of one particular service of the council. Mustn't forget its origin. You know, this panel was invented as one of our responses to when children's services was in intervention. We are very mature because we've maintained it ever since. There was occasionally the question asked around, well, should it continue? You know, should this just be absorbed within a more general programme of scrutiny? I've always advocated, no, it's really important. It's a really important safeguard, additional safeguard for the council to maintain this particular focus. The fact that you have become over time experts in many ways of children's services, because you're looking at it so closely on such a frequent basis, that basically a rolling programme of you'll carry on looking generally at the things that you do. You might pick up particular areas. So we've talked about getting a bit more understanding of what is this target operating model that we're signing up to. Is it very different to what we've been doing up until now? You know, or is it a shift, a continuation? How might it change your focus on the performance reporting that is or isn't, you know, something to be particularly mindful of? I think that is an interesting session for you to do, but I don't think much of it will come as a surprise, because it will be building on your knowledge from the past decade of doing this kind of work. The other thing that I would add to that, I think I've said it before, but it's worth repeating, CIW take considerable assurance from the fact that this committee sits with its particular focus on children's services. So when they reflect on good governance or not of our council, good corporate safeguarding or not, they reflect on this committee, the work of this committee. They might not always be on screen, but I know they play back your sessions and they look at them and they look to see, you know, what you've done, the areas that you've taken an interest in, the questions that you've asked. So given that it's a point in time where you're looking back on your past year and then looking forward, I would just want to reiterate the importance of this panel and pass on my thanks for you for doing such a good job. So please stick with it. We appreciate you being constructive friends in terms of how you engage with us, but it is important that you continue to be challenging, you know, in that constructive way, and not and that we don't take it for granted that you know that this isn't a very necessary function, because it's part of us being the best that we can be for our population of children and families. So well done and thank you.
Thank you, David. Certainly, no doubt we have come from a very difficult place to where you are now. And I think I've said it before in these meetings, the impression I get is our department is working very well and really in many ways is quite innovative. If I got that word out right, just about, I think, innovative. And it's been a pleasure in that sense working to try and improve things with you. As you say, constructive friend at the end of the day. Critical friend or a constructive friend, but critical friend, so it is important, and we will hope to try and continue that process as well. Mark?
Yeah, I just want to say that you can't be very impressed with the way the council officers are performing their roles within, you know, with difficult circumstances financially and resourcefully, and well led by Louise and the other cabinet members. So well done all. Thank you.
We will have to continue in this mood now for some time, but that means on that basis you've got to perform. That's the problem we've got. But anyway, at this point in time, I think I will sum up and say thank you very much for your attendance. It's interesting what has been said here at the end, and we'll take these points away and have a look at them and make sure that we've got a programme, hopefully, which we can send to you and you can then comment on and let us know. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Paxton.